AITA alone, on my birthday, table for 7. My wife, kids, my best friend, even my own brother, ignored the invites. They thought I didn't know about the affair. Moments later, a waiter delivered a note. Check your phone. A text from her father. I just got the alert from the trust's law firm. Call me before you destroy this entire family. The ribeye sat cold in front of me, medium rare. Ordered the way I always order it because this was supposed to be my birthday dinner, and a man should at least get his steak right even when everything else has gone wrong. The candle in the center of the table threw a low amber glow across 7 polished glasses, 7 folded napkins, 7 place settings arranged by the hostess with careful, professional cheerfulness. When I had arrived and told her yes, the rest of the party would be joining me shortly. She had smiled and said, "Of course, sir," and I had smiled back, and we had both played our parts beautifully. That was 45 minutes ago. The corner booth at Hargrove's, my favorite steakhouse in the city, the same one where I had celebrated anniversaries and promotions, and my father's retirement dinner, sat around me like a stage set with no actors. Dark wood paneling. The quiet clink of other families laughing 3 tables over. A sommelier uncorking something expensive for a couple in the far corner who kept reaching across to touch each other's hands. I cut into the ribeye. The knife went through it cleanly. I chewed slowly, and I did not taste a single bite. My name is Marcus Ellison, 58 years old. Senior trustee of the Ellison Family Trust, established by my grandfather, Raymond Ellison, in 1946, and worth just over $14 million in combined assets, properties, and logistics equity. My grandfather built that trust from nothing. From a single freight operation running routes between 3 Midwestern cities, reinvested year after year, decade after decade, until it became the kind of quiet institutional wealth that does not announce itself at parties, but shows up very loudly in courtrooms. I had been its steward for 22 years. I had turned down a buyout offer of $3.2 million because I genuinely believed, that what Raymond Ellison built deserved to outlast the people who inherited it. I had reinvested dividends instead of spending them. I had passed on the vacation home in Santa Fe that my wife, Diane, had circled in a real estate magazine and left on the kitchen counter 3 separate times. I had said no to the boat. I had said no to the early retirement. I had said yes to every boring, invisible, responsible decision that a trustee is supposed to make. And while I was doing all of that, the people sitting across from me at this empty table were quietly, methodically, and apparently gleefully taking everything apart. Diane had texted me at 6:47. A migraine coming on. So sorry, Marcus. I will make it up to you. There was a heart emoji at the end, which I found almost impressive in its audacity. My daughter Cassidy had sent a voice note around 6, breathless and apologetic. Something about a last-minute investor call she absolutely could not reschedule. My son, Derek, had not responded at all. Not to the dinner invitation I had sent 3 weeks prior. Not to the reminder I had sent 4 days ago. Not to the single follow-up text I had sent that morning that said simply, 7 o'clock tonight, Hargroves, hope to see you there. Nothing. My brother Kenneth had left me on red at 2 in the afternoon, which meant he had seen it, considered it, and made a decision. And my best friend of 30 years, a man named Raymond Pruitt, who had been the best man at my wedding and the godfather of my children, had sent me nothing at all. Not a single word. 7 people who all had something better to do on the same evening that I, a man who almost never asks for anything, had asked for one dinner. You do not flake like that independently. You coordinate. And I had known that something was being coordinated for months. The first indication was small enough that most people would have filed it under coincidence. A tax document arrived at the family lake house during a weekend visit, something from a Wyoming administrative office with my name on the outside of the envelope. My father-in-law, Gerald, had gotten to the mail before I did. I watched from the hallway as he stood at the fireplace, read the first line, folded the document precisely in half, and dropped it onto the grate. He poured 2 fingers of scotch and said, without turning around, that some things are better left alone, Marcus. His voice was calm, patrician, the voice of a man who had spent 60 years being the smartest person in every room he entered. I nodded. I said nothing. I walked back to the kitchen and I filed that memory in a place where I keep the things I am not ready to act on yet. The second indication was considerably larger. I discovered, through a routine review of our shared investment accounts, that $180,000 had been withdrawn over 14 months through a series of dummy retainer payments made to a consulting LLC. The LLC did not appear to conduct any actual business. It had no website, no listed employees, no verifiable contracts. What it did have was a registered agent address in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and a managing member whose name was listed as a variant of my wife's maiden name, close enough to be intentional, different enough to be deniable. I also discovered that the Roth IRA beneficiary designation had been quietly changed to route distributions through that same entity. I screen captured every page. I said nothing to Diane. I made her coffee the next morning and asked about her book club and listened to her talk for 20 minutes about a novel I will never read, and I kept my face completely still. The third incident was the one that removed any remaining possibility of doubt. A former intern at Cassidy's startup, the one I had personally funded with $250,000 because I believed in my daughter's vision, emailed me a compressed archive of an internal group chat. She had been quietly excluded from the company after raising concerns about financial irregularities, and she wanted me to know what was being said in my own family. I opened the archive on a Tuesday evening while Diane was at her book club, the real one this time, and I read through 43 pages of messages. Derek had written, "Let him sit alone like the martyr he loves to be." Cassidy had written, "He is not the only Ellison who matters." Raymond Pruitt, my best friend since college, my children's godfather, had sent a laughing emoji in response. And Kenneth, my own brother, had written a single line that I have since memorized because I have not yet decided what to do with the grief of it. He wrote, "Dad always knew Marcus was not the right choice for the trust." There it was. Not just theft, not just financial fraud. A verdict they had reached together in a chat I was never supposed to see about who I was and what I deserved. 3 days before my birthday dinner, I sat across from a trust administrator named Ms. Caldwell at the offices of Merritt and Glass. The room smelled of linen and old paper. Ms. Caldwell was a small, precise woman in her mid-50s who wore reading glasses on a chain and spoke in the measured cadence of someone who had seen every possible version of family collapse and had long since stopped being surprised by any of it. Between us on the conference table sat a navy leather portfolio with brass corner clips. Inside it were 8 pages of documented evidence organized by date, bank transfer records, security footage from the lake house showing Gerald at the fireplace, a notarized witness statement from the former intern, screen captures of the group chat, the IRA beneficiary change, the LLC registration documents, and the wire transfer history showing $3,000 a week flowing out of a household account into an entity that existed only on paper. Ms. Caldwell reviewed each page without expression, turning them slowly and deliberately, occasionally making a small notation on her legal pad in handwriting I could not read from across the table. When she finished, she set the portfolio down, removed her glasses, and looked at me directly and asked if I wanted to initiate full displacement across all 7 named secondary beneficiaries. Full displacement meant complete removal from distribution eligibility pending a formal misconduct review. It was the nuclear option. It was the option I had spent 6 weeks trying to talk myself out of. I did not answer immediately. I sat with the silence for a long moment, and I thought about my grandfather standing in a freight yard in 1946 with nothing but a good idea and an uncompromising sense of what things were worth. Then I nodded once. Ms. Caldwell tapped her screen. A small chime sounded, clean and final, like a period at the end of a very long sentence. She told me that by 9:15 the following morning, formal notices would be dispatched to all 7 named parties. Distributions frozen. Beneficiary status under formal review. Coordinated misconduct confirmed and documented. The birthday dinner, then, was never really about the dinner. It was about giving them one last ordinary evening before the ordinary evening ended. I had made the reservation 3 weeks in advance. I had sent the invitations in good faith, which is to say I had sent them knowing they would not come, because by that point I understood what they were doing. and part of me needed to see it confirmed in the most uncomplicated possible way. 7 empty chairs is not ambiguous. 7 empty chairs is a confession. And they had delivered it right on schedule, without even realizing that the machinery had already been running for hours before I sat down to dinner. The note arrived around 8:15. A young waiter, maybe 22, with the careful posture of someone who had been told this was an unusual delivery, brought it to the table on a small silver tray. He set it down next to the cold ribeye, said that a gentleman at the bar had asked him to deliver it, and then excused himself quickly. I looked toward the bar, but did not see anyone I recognized. I unfolded the note. 2 words, handwritten in block capitals on a card that had been torn from a pocket notebook. Check your phone. I set the card down on the linen. I picked up my phone. Gerald's text message was sitting there at the top of the screen, sent 11 minutes earlier, which meant he had received his formal notice from Merritt and Glass and had spent roughly 11 minutes composing himself before reaching out to me. The message read, "I just got the alert from the Trust's law firm. Call me before you destroy this entire family." I read it twice. I set the phone face down on the table. In the inside breast pocket of my jacket, there was a sealed envelope. Inside that envelope were the trustee reassignment documents, the formal transfer of senior trustee authority from Marcus Ellison to an independent fiduciary board at Merritt and Glass, countersigned, filed, and accepted by the court 3 days prior. I had brought the envelope to dinner the way some people bring a lucky coin, not because it needed to be there, because I needed to feel it. I did not call Gerald. I finished what remained of the cold ribeye because I had paid for it, and I am not a man who wastes things. And I asked the waiter to please bring the dessert menu even though I was not hungry because I was not yet ready to leave. I ordered the chocolate torte. I ate half of it. I left a 40% tip because none of this was the waiter's fault. And then I put on my coat and I walked out of Hargrove's into the cold evening air and I drove home. The calls began at 9 the following morning, which is to say approximately 45 minutes after Merritt and Glass completed the formal notification process. Diane called 4 times in 11 minutes. I let all 4 calls go to voicemail. Her messages escalated in a way that told me she had not yet spoken to an attorney, because someone with legal counsel would have told her to stop leaving voicemails immediately. She moved from confusion to accusation to something that was almost recognition, almost the moment where a person sees what they actually did and understands that the person they did it to also saw it. Derek texted 17 words. I do not have to share those words here because they do not deserve a permanent record. Cassidy called once and did not leave a message, which told me that she, at least, had made a phone call before mine. Kenneth sent a text that said only, "Marcus, we should talk," as if talk were still the operative tool, as if we were 2 men who had misunderstood each other at Thanksgiving and needed 20 minutes to sort it out over coffee. Raymond Pruitt showed up at my door at 11:15. He stood on the front step with his hands in his coat pockets and his face arranged into an expression I recognized from 30 years of friendship as the one he used when he knew he was wrong and was not yet sure which angle of wrongness to acknowledge first. I opened the door and I looked at him and I did not say anything. He said, "Marcus, I can explain." I said, "No, Raymond, you really cannot." And then I closed the door. Gerald called at 12:47. I answered that one. I answered it because Gerald was the one who had thrown the document in the fire, and Gerald was the one whose text message had arrived on that silver tray like a very late warning shot, and Gerald was the one who had said, "Some things are better left alone." He had always fancied himself the architect of this family's arrangements, the man behind the arrangements, the one who understood how money and loyalty and silence were supposed to function together. I wanted to hear what that man had to say now that the arrangements had been rearranged. He spoke for 4 minutes without pause. He talked about legacy and family unity and the damage I was doing to people who loved me. He talked about Diane's state of mind and Derek's future and what my grandfather would have wanted. He said the words, "Protect this family" 3 separate times, as if protection were something he had ever practiced. I let him finish. Then I said, "Gerald, You burned a legal document in a fireplace and told me some things are better left alone. I am the trustee. I decide what is better left alone. Then I ended the call. The formal misconduct review took 11 weeks. At the end of it, the independent fiduciary board at Merritt and Glass issued findings confirming coordinated financial misconduct across 5 of the 7 named parties. Diane, Kenneth, the LLC connected to Gerald's signature, and 2 subsidiary accounts tied to Cassidy's startup that I had not even known about when I first walked into Ms. Caldwell's office. Derek was found to have had awareness, but had not directly participated in the financial activity, which is a distinction that matters legally and does not matter to me at all personally. Raymond Pruitt was not a beneficiary and therefore not subject to the trust's displacement provisions, but the findings were delivered to his employer's ethics board because 2 of the retainer payments had been routed through a business account that bore his signature as a co-signatory. He resigned before the review concluded. The distributions remained frozen. The Wyoming LLC was dissolved. The $250,000 I had invested in Cassidy's startup was formally recouped through the misconduct settlement as a recovery of misappropriated trust-adjacent funds, which is a phrase I had to read 3 times before I understood that the lawyers were telling me I got my money back. The lake house was transferred into a restricted subtrust with independent management, which means no one in the family can touch it without a formal petition and a 2/3 vote from a board that does not include any of us. Diane filed for divorce in the 4th week of the misconduct review. I signed the paperwork without contest because there was nothing left to contest. She received what the prenuptial agreement entitled her to receive, which she had apparently never read carefully enough, because her attorney's tone in every correspondence suggested a level of surprise that I found grimly satisfying. I turned 59 2 months after the formal findings were issued. I made a reservation at Hargrove's. The same corner booth, 1 place setting this time, no folded napkins for empty chairs. The ribeye arrived medium rare, exactly the way I had ordered it, and I ate every single bite while it was still warm. The waiter asked if I was expecting anyone else. I said no, just me. He nodded, refilled my water glass, and left me alone in the amber light of the booth where 22 years of quiet, careful, thankless stewardship had finally, at long last, kept exactly the promise it was always supposed to keep. Raymond Ellison built something worth protecting, and I protected it. That is the whole story. That is all of it.